Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannick, and you can learn more and see all our past episodes at our website, hopefortheanimalspodcast.org. And you can support this podcast with a donation to Compassionate Living. We'll have both those website links in the show notes. I'm really excited to share today's episode with you. Vasile Stanescu is a longtime colleague who has been working on a parallel issue to me, and that is greenwashing in animal farming. Of course, one of my passions and Compassionate Living's projects is the Humane Hoax Project. And there are numerous aspects to the humane hoax beyond the ethical, and the environmental impact is such a critical component, what we're calling greenwashing. The lies and links that the animal industry will go to sell their products is, well, it's a fascination and a frustration of mine. And Voss is an academic, and he's done the hard work of researching this topic. And what he has uncovered is so important. This conversation was so engaging. I know you're going to enjoy this one. You can hear more from Voss at our upcoming Humane Hoax online conference on Saturday, February 24th. He is one of the presenters. He'll be presenting on this topic and revealing more of his research. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers this year. Registration is free at humanehoax.org, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Please register today and join us for the Humane Hoax online conference. February 24th. Okay, so one quick disclaimer. So the term cattle is used in this episode. And as you may know from listening to this podcast, language is very important to me, and I don't like to use the term cattle. I feel that it commodifies cows and it doesn't allow for cows to be seen as individuals. However, when we're talking about the environmental impacts, it's really hard to avoid because it's what the industry uses and what the science uses to describe the animals. So, yeah, well, just a disclaimer that we do use that word, but I don't like it. I don't condone it. But shifting our language to not be speciesist is a process. Okay. So, with that said, we're going to jump right into the conversation. Vasile had so much great information to share, and I had such a hard time editing anything out. So, here we go. I hope you enjoy it. All right, our speaker for today is Vasile Stanescu. He is an associate professor and chair of communications at Mercer University. He received his Ph.D. in the program of modern thought and literature at Stanford University. Vasile's research focuses on greenwashing by animal agribusiness, critiques of humane meat, in vitro meat, and the consumerist options for social change. He is the author of numerous publications on the study of animals and the environment, including in the Journal of American Culture, Rhetoric of Health and Medicine, the American Behavioral Scientist, and Animal Studies Journal. Vasile is also the co-founder of the North American Association for Critical Animal Studies. Welcome to the podcast, Vasile.
Thank you for having me, Hope.
So, Vas, you and I go way back. We knew each other in the Bay Area when you were teaching at Stanford, but we both have now left California and moved on, but are still fighting the good fight here. And I love your focus, of course, being partially my focus as well with greenwashing and humane washing. And we're going to get all into that. But we want to start with the question we always start with: why and when you went vegan?
Well, like many vegans, mine had a two-part. It started first with me going vegetarian.
Okay.
And somewhat uniquely, I went vegetarian at the age of 9.
Wow.
Yes. I bit into chicken, and I realized that chicken was chicken,
Huh.
but the animal chicken was the food chicken.
Right.
When this realization came to me at the age of 9, I was like, that's it. I'm not eating meat. And I've never eaten meat since the age of 9.
Really? That's
Really?
incredible. I love hearing that kind of story, and you hear it more often too now.
Yes, well, so there is a study done by Harvard or research scientists at Harvard
Uh-huh.
that found that that's not totally unheard of. 8% of children go vegetarian on their own, um,
Wow.
yeah, under the age of 12, against their parents' wishes. Their parents aren't vegetarian or vegan. That's not who they're looking at in the study. Both parents, as both mine did, eat meat, and the children on their own, for their own, and they're not being picky eaters. They can articulate why, actual vegetarians. They interview them, and they say, well, I don't want to hurt animals. I don't want to kill animals. I'm not going to do it. So 8%. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
That is amazing. I love that. I absolutely love that. And you feel that with the kids, you know. But yeah, go on. Tell us more. So at age 9, you went vegetarian.
that's right. Later, I checked out Peter Singer's Animal Liberation for my public library because I was getting so much pressure, and I was like, okay, I need to be able to articulate this. My first act of activism was to get a salad bar in my junior high school, which I
Wow.
succeeded to do because I think the school board was confused that a junior high school student wanted to eat salad. And so they were like, okay, you can have a salad bar.
I love it.
This is all completely true. So, yeah, vegetarian since the age of 9. And then in college, I went vegan, as many people do. I was able to control my food. It's something I'd wanted to do for a while, but could actually have more say in how I lived my life. And, I met my partner in college, and they were a vegetarian, and we both decided to go vegan together. And so it's sort of been a unified project. And I've now been vegan for 24 years.
Wonderful. I love hearing that when people go vegan when they're so, so young. And I think I'll bet even that 8%, there's so many more that either want to or maybe try and then aren't, or they're not able to for some reason.
So you
Um,
make a great point and a very important part, which
yeah.
is that a lot of people who eat meat actually have a kind of hidden trauma around it.
Huh.
So they went vegetarian, or they wanted to, or they tried to, when they realized that chicken is chicken. And their parents told them, like, well, no, it's not, or it doesn't hurt the animals, or you'll die if you don't eat meat. And so
Right.
they kind of had to hide it from themselves early on, and they were very, very young. And so, I teach a class about animals virtually every academic year. And so many of my students in the response papers and talking to them will share these stories. Like, so I have to do this like weekly couple of page response paper. And they'll share these stories of like, well, I tried to go vegetarian when I was young, and here's what happened. And so part of, not all, but part of the anger and hostility we run into is people who have actually been, to some degree, knowingly lying to themselves for a very long time. It is trauma, hidden trauma.
Well,
And so as vegans, we like bring that up. And so part of their hostility is they have to shut that down very, very quick. Jonathan Safran Foer in Eating Animals has a line which means so much to me. He says, how do you wake somebody up who's only pretending to be asleep? By which
hmm.
he means, somebody who kind of knows what's going on, has chosen to hide it from themselves, and won't even listen to you because they're actually trying not to listen to themselves.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's really powerful. It's like the hostility, there's a double, layer to it, another layer where they do know, they feel that that guilt or knowing and just trying to shut that down. Fascinating.
Of course, at some level, people do sort of know what's going on, not the specifics, not that chickens can't ever see the light of day, but that
Right.
probably most animals are not being treated that well. I mean, you can get a burger for $1. You can't get anything for $1. And that business has to make a profit. So if an alien who knew nothing came to this planet, they would immediately figure out that animals are having to be mistreated on a mass scale. So if people are not figuring this out, I mean, the videos are all there. You just Google it.
Yeah.
It's because at some level they're self-policing. At
Right.
some level, they're choosing not to know.
Yeah.
But you have to know to choose not to know. So it's a knowing unknowing. That's what we're
Mm.
actually dealing with every single time we try to do outreach to other people.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I've always thought about that, if aliens came and observed our culture and our world, our multiple cultures, but our planet, I, I would just be so embarrassed, I'd just be like, I'm sorry. I'm going to give a general apology for the human race.
I
Uh,
love that answer. People have all these things they think about what will happen with the and, aliens come, will they take over and be like, it's just be very embarrassing.
yeah, it
Sorry
really
about that,
would.
guys.
Uh, Well, we should switch gears and get into why I invited you here. You're going to be speaking at our upcoming Humane Hoax online conference, and that's going to be on February 24th. And your work is around the environmental impact of animal agriculture and especially kind of honing in and focusing in on greenwashing or when meat or other animal products is marketed as being more ecological or more climate friendly than they and then the reality than they actually are. So how did you get into this subject? How did you get interested in this subject?
Well, the first peer-reviewed article that I published was called Green Eggs and Ham.
Right. I remember that. It was
It was
awesome
all the way
name
back
too.
in, yeah, in 2010. That's right. And so that was the time period when the omnivore's dilemma had first come out, where there was all this interest at that time about what was referred to as locavorism. And as a vegan, I was eating with people who were telling me, well, that is not environmentally sustainable. Being vegan isn't environmentally sustainable. We have to eat meat for the environment. I'm eating meat for the environment.
Mm,
And so that was the first interest, was the deep dive. And is that true? And if it is not true, which it is not, why do people continue to believe this?
yeah.
And one of the things that over time I've come to realize is that this claim, which has virtually no peer-reviewed evidence of any kind, that eating meat is better for nature, is being articulated because the people are not actually talking about climate change. These people are not actually talking about species extinction. What they really mean is this kind of older idea of what is natural. Like, if you think of like Aristotle's chain of being. And what they're really saying is, I think it is unnatural to be vegan because I think it's, according to nature, it's natural for human to have dominion over other animals. And so that is the true basis of these kind of ecological claims when they try to like strap on to their arguments with no citations. So it's not that there's some wealth of peer-reviewed study of qualified academics who are saying that there's any type of meat that is sustainable for the environment. That virtually does not exist. There is a consensus around the actual science of the environmental effects of eating meat that is similar to the consensus around climate change itself. It is overwhelmingly on one side that eating meat, the production of animal agriculture, is one of the largest problems in terms of greenhouse gas emissions and in terms of species extinction. The reason you hear over and over and over again these environmental claims is twofold. One, it is this kind of basic belief of nature in the sense that this is what is natural, and therefore the science must match our own opinions. And the second one is a greenwashing by the industry itself to fund, lie, and trick people, and to try to make one of the most polluting industries in the history of the world seem one of the cleanest.
Mm,
So after this kind of work on locavorism and critiques of humane meat, where we met, the second work has been looking even how confined animal feeding operations themselves are now trying to get on the greenwashing bandwagon and pretend that their meat production is humane, is sustainable, basically taking this verbiage that was originally created for more small scale production and appropriate it for themselves. But it is, of course, equally untrue, if not more so. So I looked at a researcher at UC Davis, whose name was Frank Mitholiner, and he has basically become their front person in the US to claim that animal agriculture is good for the environment. But he is not trained as a climatologist. His funding is overwhelmingly just from the meat industry. who lionizes them in their publications. And so he just is this kind of climate change denialist for the meat industry in a similar way. There's climate change denialists for the petroleum industry, in a similar way that there were addiction denialists for the tobacco industry. So it's to chart how these same rhetorics of obfuscation that were used in other industries are currently used throughout the animal agricultural industry.
Mm. Yeah, you said something that I think, really needs to be emphasized, and that is that the science is there, just as the science is overwhelming that climate change is real, climate change is happening. The same exists in the meat and animal product realm, that animal products are bad for the environment in so many ways, and it's really not controversial. It's not that there's some other side or other way. It is pretty overwhelming that that meat, dairy, and eggs are bad for the environment, much worse than plant foods. So that is the reality, that is the science. But then unfortunately there's there's all of these products and farms and labels that are telling a different story, and that are telling a story to the public that there is some better way. I mean, there's some acknowledgement, that yes, meat is bad, dairy's bad, but look here, we can do it better, right? And I think that's what's happening with greenwashing, and why it's so popular, and why there's so much energy around greenwashing, is that there is this acknowledgement that it's bad. We're seeing the science, but they're trying to spin it and tell a different story, right? That, oh, well, there's a different way to do it. There's a new farming methods, new way to do it, right? And before we get into specifics about those methods or different farming practices, I want to talk about this thing that we'll hear so often in this space. When environmentalists start talking about food, they'll start saying that beef is the worst, cows are the problem, and that chicken meat or eggs aren't as bad. And if we just switch to chicken products, then that's going to really help. That's going to be a big impact if you just switch to chicken. And this is so frustrating to me, of course, on so many levels. We would just be killing more animals because
Right.
chickens' bodies are so much smaller. So we'd actually be causing more suffering by
Right.
switching from cows and pigs to chicken. But it's also not that much better. And it's just this frustrating thing that I hear over. I've heard it in documentaries, I've seen it in paper, I've seen it everywhere.
Mm.
So what is going on with this, and how can we counter this? How can we explain that chicken meat and chicken eggs are bad as well?
Well, that's a fantastic question. So let me first echo one of the things that you stated, which that chickens are the single most abused animal on the planet.
Yeah.
And they're the most abused animal in a couple of different ways. So they're the most abused animal because they're the most killed. So approximately 70 to 80 billion land animals are raised and killed for human consumption each year. So that doesn't include aquatic life that's killed. That doesn't include animals that are killed for entertainment or rodeos or fashion or clothing. But just for food, 70 to 80 billion land animals are killed. The overwhelming majority of that 70, 80 billion are chicken, somewhere between 80% of all the land animals that are killed. So to some degree, when we are talking about on the scale of the mass amount of meat eating that we're talking about, what we're talking about are chickens.
Yeah.
They're secondly the most abused animal because they're actually overwhelmingly treated the worst. In the United States, legally, chickens are not even considered to be animals. Of everything that I teach my students in my animal classes, I think this is the hardest thing for them to understand. They're like, well, if they're not animals, what are they? Legally, they're just an object, like a table or a chair, and that is the amount of rights they have.
Yeah.
So while farmed animals have terrible, nearly non-existent rights, absolutely, cows do not have it good, pigs do not have it good, there are at least some protections. They are at least legally considered to be an animal. Chicken are not. And therefore, legally, under federal law, anyone can do whatever they want. to a farmed chicken. If, as I explain to my students, if Crazy Eddie wants to take a chicken and burn the chicken alive because that amuses him under federal law, that is completely legal. So they are just the most abused animals in the greatest number.
Mm.
There are some vegan activists, and I wholly oppose this as well, but that they actually say, well, we should urge people to shift from chicken to beef because cows are larger and will produce more meat, and so that will decrease suffering. So there's this kind of weird way where people swap around terrible options
Yeah.
and be like, well, here's one other terrible option, instead of just saying, look, all these options are terrible.
Yeah.
Mass suffering, mass torture, mass death, but also mass greenwashing and climate change are all terrible options. There's no reason to select any of them, since obviously plant-based options don't contribute to any of these same problems. It's also just not factually true. So yes, pound for pound, chicken produce less greenhouse gases than cows do, both because of methane emissions, bird flatulence, and land use changes. What is left out of that is so many more chickens are killed that the actual greenhouse gas effect, the total climate change effect of these 70 billion chickens that are killed a year is still massive.
Right.
So doubling down on that doesn't solve the problem. It also doesn't mean we're consuming any less meat, which we have to do. The United Nations released a report where they said every single possible environmentally sustainable scenario that we have evaluated has determined there has to be a global decrease in meat consumption by at least 75%. And it doesn't matter whether it's rotational grazing or grass-fed or humane or local. It doesn't matter if you shift from one animal to another animal. The total number of animals being killed has to go down. And what we keep seeing is people trying to do this musical chairs to not have to face hard choices or real reality and pretend that there's another option. If we can just kill a different animal, we'll get out of it. Let me
Mm.
add one more point. So you talked about these studies earlier, and you're correct. The studies are overwhelmingly in consensus. But I'll tell you about the best one. So Joseph Poore at the University of Oxford, he did what is called a full life cycle analysis. So what does that mean? It means he looks at the total amount of greenhouse gases produced, not theoretically, but actually going to the field, actually looking at individual farms and the foodstuffs. And he did this at 119 countries. He looked at 40,000 farms. He looked at 40 different food productions. And again, this isn't theoretical. So many of these conversations are like, well, in theory, if we did this, what would we find? But what he did is he actually looked at virtually all the different types of food that's being produced in all the different types of places throughout the world. The conclusion he came to, and I'll read it to you, it's a direct quotation. Quote, a vegan diet is the single biggest way to reduce your impact on planet Earth. It is far bigger than cutting down on your flights. It is far bigger than buying an electric car. So if we look at what is actually happening, the overwhelming consensus is that shifting to a vegan diet is the single most impactful thing that anyone can do to affect climate change.
Wow, really, really powerful. Yeah, that's an amazing study. I'd love it if you could send it to me. I might add a link in
Of
our
course,
show notes. Yeah. Yeah, and I'll just add too, if I could, about chicken.
please.
So, like you said, just the sheer number of them is causing so much greenhouse gas emissions. The massive scale. So there is emissions, major emissions, but there's also numerous other things going on as far as water consumption and energy consumption and things like that that sometimes are even worse than dairy production or
Mm,
some meat productions. I've seen statistics that their chicken meat water consumption is actually higher
mm,
on average. And then also the pollution, the runoff from these chicken farms going into our waterways, causing dead zones. A lot of that is majority from chicken farming. There's so many issues, so many different aspects and impacts, and oftentimes we just get people just focus in on climate change, But there's a much bigger picture with air
Hmm.
pollution, water pollution, all of that. And chicken meat and chicken egg production is very heavy on all those impacts.
I mean, I think all of that is absolutely correct. And fundamentally, it's just a rhetorical game to shift the focus and to shift from, okay, well, we have this problem, well, we can just kill this other animal. And maybe in that one particular, as you say, that one particular area where you're looking at, it might be slightly better. But since it's always also still worse in another area, nothing is being changed or improved. More fundamentally, there's no reason to do it at all. No one needs to eat meat. No one
Right.
needs to eat chicken. No
Yeah.
one needs to eat beef. So if there is no reason, nutritionally or ethically or environmentally, then why are we causing additional suffering and additional ecological destruction?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Well, okay. So I want to dig in a little deeper to the greenwashing issue and get specific with some of the farming methods and the labels that we see. So let's talk about grass-fed and regenerative. And the first thing that people pop to mind, of course, is beef with grass-fed and regenerative farming. But now we're seeing dairy farming this way. We're also seeing other meats, sheep, pigs, pork. So it's broadening, unfortunately, this new farming method. So it's not only beef. Just to
Right.
kind of keep that in mind as we're
True.
talking about it. Talk about grass-fed and regenerative and all of that, and kind of what it is and why it is not what it says it is, what people think it is.
Absolutely. So it's exactly what we talked about earlier. So there's this growing awareness of the environmental impact of meat consumption. And so, in response to this growing awareness, there's been a shift towards marketing terms to suggest that particularly grass fed beef could have a positive environmental effect. And so, grass fed beef, the idea behind grass fed beef or pasture raised beef is instead of the animals being fed in a feedlot with corn that's brought in, they're raised on pasture. Now, actually, in industrial farming, all cows spend some time on pasture before going into the feedlots. So sometimes what happens, it'll just be the identical industrial farming and they'll just highlight the pasture aspect. And
Hmm.
sometimes they'll be on the pasture for the whole time and they'll highlight that to suggest that it has a environmentally superior value. That if they just ate the pasture grass, it'll have less of an environmental impact. So that's the essence of grass fed. Now let's go through a couple of reasons why the science actually doesn't check out. So Nathan Peatler did a study that actually found grass-fed cattle produce more, 50% more greenhouse gas emissions than even cattle raised in confined animal feeding operations. To give you again a direct quotation from him, quote, "We do see significant differences in the greenhouse gas intensities of grass versus grain finishing. It's roughly on the order of 50% worse in grass finished systems.
Mm.
In contrast, Peatler estimated that replacing all meat with soy or another plant-based option decreases the greenhouse gas emissions from protein creation by 96%.
Wow.
There's a series of other studies that I could go through. Adrian Williams in England, you mentioned it's not just cows, and that's certainly true. He found free-range chickens have 20% greater impact on global warming than even chickens raised in confined animal feeding operations. Organic eggs have 14% higher on climate change than even eggs produced in confined animal feeding operations. There's a series of other studies. So why? Why are there studies that show that pasture-raised, free-ranged animals actually are worse for climate change than even those raised in factory farms? One reason is the amount of feed these animals have to eat. While confined animal feeding operations are horrible for a host of reasons, many of which you already mentioned, one thing they do well is to produce pounds and pounds of meat very, very quickly. So the animals actually take longer to get to what's called market weight. And so they have more burps, more flatulence, and they consume more feed the longer that takes. So having animals that are raised in pasture or grass-fed means that there's actually more greenhouse gas emissions because it takes longer to get them to the market weight than there would have been even in a feedlot. Also, one of the primary causes of the environmental effects of the meat industry is what is referred to as land use changes. So that's like cutting down of trees in order to make pasture for these cattle. Well, that increases in a free range system. Now, let me say just a few more words specifically about regenerative farming. That's sort of the new term that's come out. So, as we were talking earlier, both of us have been at this for a long time.
Yeah.
And so what we've noticed is that the industry keeps shifting the terms. So as different terms become debunked or not trendy or not in, they'll say, okay, well, sure, that's been disproved, but have you considered this new term, which actually is very similar to the old system? So we had local, and then that sort of became debunked, and then pasture raised, and that sort of became debunked, and grass fed, and that sort of became debunked, and free range, and that sort of became debunked. And the new one is regenerative farming. And sometimes it'll even be the exact same farm that simply changes how they market themselves. So
Mm.
Joel Salatin, who did Polyface Farms, has marketed his same farm with each of these different terms. And
Wow.
currently he markets his farm as doing regenerative farming.
Uh,
But the farm itself hasn't changed. And there are virtually no studies to back any of this up, and there are virtually no studies to back up regenerative farming. The one study I could find, only one, it found the benefits of regenerative farming, quote, were not scalable. So they looked at one farm, but they didn't think that it could be used in other farms. The benefits might be temporary, as the grass simply absorbs less carbon. And even to achieve these temporary benefits, the authors of the study had to assume no use of fertilizer, no use of any feed crops, no conversion of any new grassland, no killing of any predatory animals, and no irrigation of any kind. Even if just irrigation was considered, the temporary benefits vanished. So the idea between regenerative farming is that grass can have a positive impact in terms of the environment. And so if cattle need grass and we are able to produce new grasslands, that will offset the carbon emissions from the cattle. But the actual research says none of that is true and none of that is scalable. Tara Garnett at the Food Climate Research Network at Oxford University has extensively studied regenerative farming, and her conclusion is that even if in theory regenerative farming could provide some benefit, in practice, it always produces more carbon emissions and environmental harm. As Garnett phrased it in a particularly candid interview about her research, quote, "We cannot escape the fact that if we are going to have a hope in hell of cutting our climate emissions, then we need to stop our consumption of animal products. And that holds true whatever the animal type and whatever the system in which it's been produced." So that kind of goes back to the study I mentioned with POR, which is all the researchers that look at actual farms, not theoretical farms, not something someone has made up in their head, but any animals who are actually being farmed. The consensus and the conclusions are always the same. What they're doing is not sustainable, it is terrible for the environment, and it is not scalable. And what they also find is that switching to a plant-based diet would help.
wow. Well, yeah. I mean, just the other day, I heard somebody say there was an ad for local grass-fed beef, and it was just like a flyer, on a bulletin
Mm,
board. So it wasn't even like in a product, so someone could just
mm,
contact this farm, right? And someone who was vegan actually made a comment about it, like, oh, that's awful. Or we both were looking at like, ugh. And then they said, yeah, but at least it's a little better. And I
mm.
it's just like, oh no. Everybody thinks this, right?
Right,
It's so frustrating. I think most people that look at these labels, they think that it's slightly better. Uh,
right.
But I think if people maybe, are a little skeptical or whatever, they may think that it's just neutral or just the same. Like you said, one farm will just switch the label to have the same farming method, same, nothing changed on the farm, but they'll just, switch the label to something. And I think people think maybe that's what's going on. But when you dig into these things, we are learning that they can be even worse for the environment. That when they do make changes, when they are getting the animals out of the confinement buildings and onto pasture, then of course we're using so much more land. We're cutting trees, we're filling wetlands, we're, trying to create space for these animals, and it's just devastating wild areas and green areas. And that's just one reason why it can be even worse. So can you kind of talk about this a little bit, give some examples of why some of these farming methods are actually worse?
Yes, absolutely. I love this point. I love that you make this point. You are correct. I think the overwhelming majority of vegans believe, whichever term we want to use, but they believe local meat or quote unquote humane meat or regenerative farming or grass fed or free range, while not as good as going vegan, is still better than confined animal feeding operations. And one of the things, Hope, I love about you, one of the things that I love about what you do and talk about, and I hope more people will listen, is your point that no, actually, there's no real difference. And in many ways, environmentally, it's even worse. And you are exactly correct. And one of the biggest ways, well, the movement has lost its way, is believing that this is somehow on the path towards veganism or helpful in any way. So, to give you some specifics, if we switch to all grass-fed beef in the United States, it would require an additional 64.6 million cows to produce the same amount of meat that we do now because of the longer it takes for them to get to market weight. It would consume 131 million additional acres of land. It would reduce 135 million more tons of greenhouse gas emissions. None of
Mm.
that is better. All of that is much, much worse. If U.S. beef produced in 2010 were grass-fed, the industry would require an additional 200,000 square miles. That's an area in land larger than the states of New York, Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio combined. Now I'm quoting from other peer-reviewed research that's come to these conclusions. These are not research I've done myself, but this is the consensus. And to be clear, this is worse in terms of climate change. It is also worse in terms of animals because one of the things they leave out is all of the wild animals. So the single largest driver of species loss, death of wild animals, is animal agriculture. Over 1 million animals and plants are at risk. More animal species go extinct each year than happened in 100 years prior to our most recent time of keeping track. I mean, they literally trap and kill all these animals who are wild animals to protect these farmed animals. So when they show you these beautiful images of cows eating grass and it seems so idyllic, what they're leaving out is the US government going in and trapping and killing all the wolves or other predators. When they show these chickens out in the fields, well, first of all, chickens actually don't want to be in fields. They want to be in trees. They've been genetically bred to a degree that their own body hurts them. So the longer that they get to live just means they're in more pain. And there's nothing anybody can do about that except not having these breeds of chickens where their own bodies hurt them because they made their breasts so big. So you're actually just making more animal suffering, not less. But it also leads out that they had to kill all the hawks to protect these animals. So
Mm.
there's just more animal death, more animal suffering, and it's worse for climate change all at the same time. It's not better, it's worse. And there is no animal advocate who should argue for it at all.
Yeah, this is such critical information that needs to get out not only to the vegan community, but to everyone. They are lying to us with these labels. It's not better. They're just wanting to repackage and sell their products. So frustrating. And really, really good point about the wild animals, too. If we are animal lovers and want to protect all animals, these situations of getting the animals out onto pasture, it certainly affects wild animals, and more wild animals will suffer and be killed. when these animals are put out, quote unquote, on pasture. So, yeah, wow.
Before we leave this point too, I just want to
Yeah.
highlight that in 2010, when we collectively first started doing our research, we had critiques of local farming, humane farming, grass-fed. And these critiques were all true, but at least it was a different industry. At least the people who are running these farms were not the same people who were running the confined animal feeding operations. Now, that is very much not the case. Let me give you one example. Niman Ranch is the largest producer of so-called humane meat in the world. Niman Ranch is not owned by Bill Niman, who originally founded it, or his wife, Nicolette Niman, who were forced out by shareholders who wanted to make more money. Bill Niman has publicly condemned Niman Ranch because of the way it now treats its farmed animals and will not eat any meat from Niman Ranch. Niman Ranch is now owned by Purdue,
Oh,
which is a confined animal feeding operation.
wow.
So what has increasingly happened is it is just one industry. And what the one industry has is a different brand where they treat animals whatever is minimally necessary to be able to market that at a much higher price. But obviously, buying from Purdue is never going to put Purdue out of business. It's never actually going to critique Purdue. And all of them have this. Tyson has multiple brands, Cargill has multiple brands. And the consumer can't tell when they look at the product that this is actually still Cargill or this is still Tyson any more than the consumer, if they go to the webpage at Nyman, no matter how long they look, will anything ever tell them this is actually Purdue. But that is what is occurring. It is one industry. Sometimes the farms now will just literally be beside each other. So there'll be a confined animal feeding operation, treating the animals in the way that many people have critiqued for a long time. And on the same land, just right next door, there'll be the quote unquote free range farm. Because what the industry has realized is this isn't really a critique. It actually lets us make more money. All we do is we just treat a certain percentage of the animals slightly differently, and we can bring in more profit. But it's the same industry that's is actually just getting wealthier.
Yeah, really good point. And when I was investigating chicken farms in Sonoma County and
Mm,
looking into cage-free farms, I found that where I would be on a farm and there would be
mm,
multiple buildings, the multiple long windowless warehouse looking buildings, and you'd look in one and it would be battery cages. And you
mhm.
just walk to the next building over and
Right,
it would be
right,
a cage-free
right,
system.
right,
So, and then the next one over, they'd maybe have a little outdoor space. So it's they're owned by the same people. If they and this is what I've always said, if they really cared, if they really thought that it was better in any
right.
way, wouldn't they have all of their animals in the cage-free or free range situation? No, they don't care.
No,
They know that it's no better. They just want to make money, have a different market, be able to slap different labels on the different
exactly,
cartons and make more money.
exactly.
Yeah.
Niche marketing. That's all
Yeah.
that's happening. And then in addition to that, they are, and this is where my research currently is, they're actively funding by researchers to produce bogus research to try to claim that it is sustainable or in some way different. So right now I'm looking at Canada and the beef trust there, and they're actually hiring professors. So this is what's going on. It's simply amazing. But the beef trust in Canada is going to universities saying, look, we will just give you money. We will fund the position if you will hire a researcher that we choose, who will then be an endowed chair, endowed by us, the beef industry, to research the beef industry. And as part of the contract, these researchers have to even report to us. So it's literally a boss to employee type relationship. And unfortunately, some universities are going along with this because they get a whole free professor. And so the industry is doubling down on greenwashing, very similar to how the coal industry did, very similar to how the petroleum industry is doing. They are intentionally trying to trick the public from believing that one of the most polluting industries is one of the most sustainable.
Hmm.
Part of it is these marketing terms, part of it is buying these farms, and part of it is literally trying to doctor the research by buying the academics.
Wow. Oh, it's so dirty. Yeah, and such a good point too about how it's all connected and how, because I think I actually get this critique from people when from vegans. People will say, why are you focusing on just the small farms that are trying to do it better? Don't focus on it's such a small number of animals, and these people are trying to do it better. You should be focusing on the big, the industrial. And it's like, no, it's all connected. First of all, it's all connected. It's all the same industry, and the big guys are doing it too. All of the, like you just said, Tyson, Purdue, they own these small farms.
You are
And
focused on the big industry. Shouldn't we be focusing on the most profitable sector of the big industry? You
yeah,
know, I
yeah,
mean, that's why they're investing in it. And shouldn't we be focused on the false rhetoric that's tricking people that they don't have to make any hard choices?
yeah,
One of the reasons why the big industry is focusing on these types of products is so that people think what you were mentioning earlier, that they can just eat chicken instead of cows, or they can eat free range instead of confined animal feeding operations, so that no one ever has to eat less meat. The only thing the industry cares about, and I actually spend a lot of my time reading industry publications, going to industry conferences, hearing what the meat industry themselves say to each other. And what they overwhelmingly say is the only thing they're actually worried about is people eating less meat. They don't care which meat people eat.
wow.
And so as long as they can keep people eating meat, then it's all fine. And so what you're doing, and the reason why you're doing is so important, is saying, look, even if the numbers are relatively small, the rhetoric has an importance outside of just the numbers, of making people feel like they don't have to do anything because the industry itself is fixing their own problems. It's
Yeah,
like clean coal. Clean coal doesn't even exist, and virtually no coal is ever marketed as clean. So why did the industry spend so much time investing in it? Because the rhetoric of clean coal suggests that there's a way to keep using coal. Well, humane farming doesn't really exist, and almost no animals are marketed as humane farming. So why does the industry keep investing in it? Because a rhetoric of humane or green or regenerative farming suggests that there's a way to eat meat which is sustainable. And that rhetoric is incredibly powerful.
yeah. It's interesting because I am grateful that people want to to help. They want to,
Right.
they want to help. They're concerned about
Sure.
the environment or the treatment of the animals. They want to do the right thing. So that's great. I mean, I'm grateful
Right.
that they do. But that's even more reason why we have to get this information out so that people know that, don't waste your money. It's not, don't spend more money. It is not helping.
No, no, it's not helping, and it's going to the
Yeah.
same industry. And also, I mean, so I've been teaching this animal studies class on and off for 15 years now. And the sea change even within the students, where now I have to do double duty, where it's not only do I have to explain all the problems with animal agriculture, I then have to go through and explain all the problems with humane meats or
Mm,
pasture raised or grass fed,
right.
because
Yeah.
that's the immediate place that they go to. And so I can see in my own life, in my own practice, in real time, the danger of this kind of rhetoric to produce any real action. Look, we all know this experience where you're talking to somebody and they go an endless number of hypotheticals. Well, what if you were on an island and there was only one pig, and now
Yeah.
the pig doesn't eat anything on the island, and you can't possibly eat anything that the pig does, and you're going to die? Would you eat the pig? And what is the point of all of that is, for some reason, if there's ever a time, ever, one time, ever, that it's ethical to eat any animal ever, somehow all meat eating becomes justified. This is the same game where there's these endless hypothetical farms, even though everyone who studies any actual farm says, no, this isn't sustainable. But they're like, okay, but what if? So they just
Mhm.
endlessly imagine these farms, none of which exist. And they say,
Mm,
what if we did this and this and this and this? Wouldn't that somehow be sustainable? But the point isn't that virtually non existent farm. The point is, the moment someone says yes, the belief is somehow all meat eating is now allowed.
right. 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 And I think too, there's this false assumption that there's kind of improvement across the board, right?
Yeah, right,
That
right.
if
Things are getting
some,
better. The industry's
yeah,
going to fix their own problems. We don't need any
yeah.
government regulation.
Exactly,
Yes,
exactly.
right.
Even if someone isn't even buying that kind of meat, they're just eating the regular meat. I think they're under the impression that because free range meat exists, or free range eggs and regenerative meat exists, that it's all getting better. Right. It's all
Exactly.
moving in that
Even though
direction.
it's all getting worse, even though the number
Yeah,
of animals being
right.
killed is doubling, the climate change is right. So yes, yes. Also, and this is also a trick the industry does, is trying to make people feel individually guilty, or as you say, not paying more money. So when they go to the store and they see these products which are labeled as being better or more sustainable, but they cost so much more, and they go, well, I can't afford that, and they don't pay for it, then they're not mad at the industry for destroying the planet and torturing all the lives. They're mad at themselves for not having
Um,
spent that extra money and
yeah.
buying those eggs. I
Wow.
mean, the personal carbon footprint was actually invented by BP to shift the attention off of BP and to shift it onto each individual person so we
Wow.
all feel bad and guilty instead of politically engaged. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've heard something similar about recycling.
Yes, yes. You're
That
100% correct
yeah,
about
the
recycling.
plastics industry
That's right.
brought about recycling so that
Yes.
they put the burden on the consumer.
Consumer. Yes, you're not doing
Yeah.
it all perfectly right because you have to live in a real world, even though in reality, it's these companies.
Yeah.
Even though it's a handful of people who've gotten phenomenally wealthy, destroying the entire planet, the
Uh,
way they distract blame from them is endless guilt about every individual person to an endless amount. And that is 100% the game they're now doing, whichever new term they want to use,
yeah.
in terms of suggesting this overpriced meat that you're not paying for. It's your fault. You could have been doing it. Don't tax, regulate, or control us.
Mm. Wow. Vas, I just, what a wonderful conversation. And I appreciate so much you having all this knowledge and talking with me about it today. Whew, it's so important. Well, so now we know the problems, we have dug in deep to what is going on. What are some of the solutions beyond going vegan? I mean, of course we know that, right? We know that we need to go vegan and we can keep talking about that because it's very important. But what even beyond that could we do as a society, as a planet?
Well, that is exactly the right question. I mean, the only question that really matters at the end of the day is how do we win?
Yeah.
And I have a few thoughts that are all supported by peer-reviewed data. This is not just my gut instinct. So one thing that I think we need to do is articulate veganism not as a diet, not as a consumerist option. What we just talked about is part of the trick, but as a social justice movement in
Yes.
solidarity with other social justice movements.
Yes.
African Americans are disproportionately likely to be vegan, more likely to be vegan than white Americans, although not everyone realizes that, even in the vegan community, and are the fastest growing demographic of new vegans in the US. So we met in San Francisco, we met in the Bay Area. So I moved to Georgia, and some people are like, how are you going to eat vegan moving to Georgia? It's easier. Around my house in Atlanta, in biking distance, there's 6 vegan restaurants that are
Wow.
delicious and affordable, which was not true in the Bay Area. And they are all of them, African American owned and operated. And yet, when you go to these restaurants, and absolutely they care about animals, but they also care about dietary racism. They also care about lack of health. They also care about this history since slavery of not giving Black people in this country decent food, and that's still the case. And so they're actually going to, help their own communities to become healthy. So, we need to focus on issues of access. My partner and I lived in West Oakland. You might know West Oakland. There was a big billboard that said, eat 5 a day, fruit and vegetables, paid for by the US government. There were virtually no restaurants in all of West Oakland. There were virtually no grocery stores in all of West Oakland. Where was anyone who lived there supposed to get a fruit or vegetable? And so
Right.
it's quite rich
Yeah.
for us to say, oh, well, all I have to do to get the vegan option is go to Grubhub and push for the vegan option, which is then delivered to my house. So someone who is struggling to be vegetarian in a food desert is doing something vastly more moral than I am on any given day. And it makes no sense to call them out as somehow not being pure enough when the scale of access is completely different. We have to focus on access as a movement, and we should be.
Yeah.
Food deserts is a vegan issue. The last thing I'll add is we actually know why people eat meat, and it's not taste. The Impossible Burger, Michael Pollan can't tell the difference. He was being interviewed And they gave him a taste test of the impossible, it was impossible meatballs in a sub and regular meatballs, and he couldn't figure out which was which. I mean, nobody can. I can give you a series of taste tests where it's like a coin toss. So if it was taste, that problem has long since been solved. So why is it? Why is it that people still eat meat? And we're not going to be very effective activists if you don't start with that question. And we know why. And the reason is social stigma. They don't want to feel alone. They don't want to feel weird. They don't
Mm,
feel isolated.
yeah.
I mean, in my own class, that is the reason. I mean, in this class, we watch in class Earthlings, the whole thing.
Wow.
When people say, well, glass walls will all be vegetarian. Well, everyone in my class is clearly glass walls. I mean, we read whole books, multiple books, and they have to take quizzes or tests or response papers on it. So I know they've done the reading. No one leaves this class without knowing what is going on. And, many of them still continue to eat meat. Why is that? Well, they'll even tell me. I mean, they'll just tell me directly. And they'll say, I don't want to seem weird. That is why people eat meat. So until we confront the social stigma around meat eating, in fact, until we invert it, until we make meat eating what is stigmatized, and veganism, vegan pride is one of the things I believe in so passionately.
Mm,
Veganism as what we respect and admire and think well of. We're never going to get anywhere, no matter how much we invest in whatever the new plant-based option is, because that wasn't the problem in the first place. We have to show love and caring and support to every other vegan. I mean, there's so much focused on the front door. Well, how can we get another vegan? How can we get them in? And so little focused on the back door, everybody leaving the movement.
yeah.
And it is completely the recidivism rate. That's what we call it in the research. People who go vegetarian or vegan or start eating meat again. And it's because they feel depressed and isolated and alone and stigmatized. And so we have to make up this difference in the movement to each other and let every other vegan know what you're doing is the most important thing in the world. All the peer-reviewed data in the world shows it's the single greatest thing you can do for climate change. But of course, it also is the single greatest thing you can do for animals. And you are choosing something that is hard for you and good for others. And that is rare and valuable and wonderful. And until we can love each other, and I know that doesn't sound like what an academic would say, but is what the academic research shows, we're not going to get very far.
Wow, really well said. So true. So true. Normalizing veganism, I think, is really important. Like the vegan default kind of concept, but that's with food, the vegan default concept being that like if you're in a cafeteria or at a restaurant, vegan is the default menu, and then you can add in meat or whatever. But I kind of think about it as a larger, broader concept is that vegan is just the default. Compassion is the default of people. It's the norm. It's the normal. That's how we have to, what we need to start moving towards, how we need to start thinking. Yeah, so important.
I mean, I feel there's all this pressure for us to hide or to apologize. But look, I'm not going to say I'm vegetarian when really I'm vegan. I'm not going to say I follow a plant-based diet or plant strong, whatever the heck that even means. I'm a vegan, and I'm a vegan because of what I believe in.
Yeah,
And what I believe in is a social justice issue about animal liberation.
yeah,
That is what we need to articulate. That's not going to hurt the movement. I mean, I hear vegans say that, but they are wrong.
yeah,
What we have to do is tell people the truth, fight for what we actually believe in, let people know. I mean, of course, it matters to my students that they have a professor who is vegan. Of course, it matters to everyone that you meet, that everyone meets. It's like, hey, this is something that is deeply ethical, that I really care about, that actually matters. That's what we should be telling people, not hiding. That suggests it's shameful. That suggests that somehow, there's something untoward, that we need to trick people. Look,
right.
even if people disagree with us, at the end of the day, most people can respect somebody who genuinely, authentically cares about what they're fighting for because they believe it is true and kind and good. And as a vegan, that's what we should be doing and telling each other all the time that I know it is hard. I know you're sad. I am also overwhelmed. I am also sad. But what you're doing is the most important thing in the world.
Mm, I love that. Vegan pride. Yeah, it's great. Vegan normalization. And something that you said about, not being apologetic. Karen Davis, who we lost last year.
He was the
She
best at this. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was so good at that, don't be apologetic. Don't him and haw about, oh, well, I'm sorry, I don't eat this and I don't like no, own it, be strong, be powerful. I'm a vegan. And she would say in a loving way, in a kind way,
Exactly. And a lot,
but
yeah,
but
right.
also have vegan pride. I love that. Yeah. Well, Voss, we have to wrap up. This has been such a powerful conversation. Let's wrap up with our last question, though. What gives you hope for the future?
Well, what gives me hope is how many problems the meat industry is causing. And I know that sounds ironic. But I mean, when I talk to people, I don't start with what I care about. I ask them, I say, what do you care about? And whatever it is, I then explain how animal agriculture is part of the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if they care about worker rights, the most exploitive industry towards worker rights are confined animal feeding operations. Right? They
Mm.
have over 100% turnover. I was shocked turnover. How can it be over 100%? But they do. They go through all their workers, all of them, every single year. That's how
Wow.
the world industry is. If they care about undocumented, which I also care about, I mean, the meat industry advertises in other countries, brings over workers from, say, Mexico or Guatemala, puts them in these kind of like sharecropping type situations. So they have these like terrible housing that's the industry owns that they charge the workers for the kind of housing. And then if they ever try to do anything, unionize or complain or whatever, then they call INS and have them deported. It's an industry funded idea. So, you talked about environmental racism. I mean, the pollution, the runoff that are in the poor communities and the Black communities and the Hispanic communities covered. No one wants to live by these animal farms. So whether it's the environment, workers' rights, whatever it is, on so many levels, the industry is what's causing the problem. And the industry is so fragile. Like I told you, I like to go to listen to the industry. Well, you don't hear an industry that actually is very confident. They're terrified because of how fragile they are. And
Mm.
they have to get massive subsidies all the time. The dairy industry is a zombie industry today, right now, already. Not because everyone's vegan, but because people just don't like milk. They like almond milk more. So if we ended all of the help that dairy industry is getting, the dairy industry already would be out of business. That is a fragile industry. An industry that needs constant help and support just to stay alive is a weak industry. It is one that, while it seems so big, can go away in a poof. And all we have to do is just pull away our support.
Well, that is hopeful. It really is. That is one of the most unique but really powerful hope for the futures that I've gotten, that the meat and dairy industry is so fragile. You're right. It's heavily subsidized. There, even though it seems like this behemoth, it's just being propped up by our support. And if we can just pull those pillars of support out from under it, it will collapse easily. You're right.
And let me end the way that I like to end every single interview that I ever give.
Yeah.
If you're a vegan and you're listening to this, I am proud of you. I am so thankful for you. I know how hard it is, and I appreciate you every single second of every single day. Thank you.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you for that, Voss. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. It is critical. And thank you so, so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Hope.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. Okay, so this is the episode to share. Please share this episode. This information is so important. It needs to get out far and wide. You can help by sharing this episode to your networks. We will have a post of this episode on our Facebook and our Instagram page. You can share from there. You can share from wherever you're listening, whether it's an app or our website. Also, please scroll down on your podcast app if you're listening on an app and give us those 5-star ratings. The 5 stars really help to boost our algorithm. So please take some action and help me get this information out there. It's so critical to our very survival on planet Earth, to everyone's survival, human and non human. And also be sure to join us at our Humane Hoax online conference on Saturday, February 24th, where you can hear more from Voss and other great speakers. Registration is free, and I'll have a link in the show notes. And if you're listening to the podcast after that date, we will have the videos of each of the presentations on our Compassionate Living YouTube page and also on our Humane Hoax Project page, and that's just humanehoax.org. And I'll have those links in the show notes. As Vasile said, thank you for everything you do for the animals, for the planet. Know that you are helping. Know that your actions do matter, that your compassion does make a difference, and live vegan.